Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chris Curran and James Munn from Galleon Marine Underwriting Agency, and we're here to talk through the subject of the surveyor and the insurer and mitigating losses.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So just to give you a bit of background with regard to Galleon, James, do you want to say something?
Chris and myself set up Galleon as an independent cover holder or managing general agent back in May 2010, and we had the support of several Lloyd's syndicates, and we focused primarily on two classes of insurance. The first, which isn't relevant today, is the cargo liability arm, and the one that we're going to focus on this afternoon is the professional indemnity. In 2016, one of our panel of Lloyd's syndicates, Markel, knocked on our door and offered to buy the agency. So from November 2016, Galleon has been fully integrated into Markel. The entire team, there's 4 of us, are now part of the wider marine liability team at Markel. And a bit of background about Markel: they're a huge US insurance company, Fortune 500 company, so they have vast capabilities and reach.
And A-rated, they provide all aspects of insurance coverage, including marine and marine liability, both in terms of Lloyd's of London and Markel Insurance Company.
So, the topic today really is marine professional indemnity insurance. What is it and who needs it? So, professional indemnity insurance can help any business cover the cost of compensation claims and legal action should a client or customer sue for negligence. If there is a mistake in any professional service that's provided, this indemnity cover will prevent you from suffering a financial loss when defending or settling the claim. For businesses and professionals providing advice or direct services to clients and customers, there is always the risk that your work will be challenged. Professional indemnity insurance, that can also be referred to as professional liability insurance, will protect against those risks. So if your client or customer loses money or sees damage caused to their reputation or asset as a result of your business, as a result of your recommendation and professional service, this insurance will step in and provide cover. It should also be seen as an essential consideration to any business insurance package, any individual providing professional service, or any corporation purchases. It's important that you feel confident in the quality of any work that you provide, but even with the best of intentions, errors and disputes over quality can and do occur.
And by the way, professional indemnity is also known as errors and omissions insurance, or the abbreviated term of E&O insurance. So it's all about whether a mistake is made, unintentional mistake, and that's where PI or E&O insurance is there to help protect you.
It's also worth noting that we've both referred to mistakes being made, but there doesn't actually have to be a mistake. It's the accusation that's the focal point here. If someone makes a spurious accusation against a professional service that you've provided, the legal defence costs can run into the several thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. And that's again why this insurance policy is beneficial.
So this particular slide just highlights or lists out the types of cover that is provided by a typical PI or E&O insurance policy. And the most important part is the first line there, the negligent performance of a professional duty. So in this particular case, this would really be where it's been alleged that you've performed a poor or inadequate survey. If you do employ people, it would also cover fraud by those employees. The other aspects are libel, slander or infringement of personal rights and unintentional breach of authority. In the case of unintentional breach of authority, that's a situation where you think you've got authority from your principal or client and you go beyond that remit. The policy also covers third-party liabilities. That could be in a situation where you've caused injury, death or harm to other people. Also physical loss or damage to third-party property. That could be damage to the vessel that you're surveying, for example, and also any consequential loss. So it's not only where you've provided, there's indemnity for the poor survey or alleged bad survey there, but also the consequential loss suffered by your clients.
And so an example of that would be if there's an injury to a person and there is loss of income, for example. The policy wouldn't cover, for example, in the States, if there were any punitive damages, if you had some kind of jury trial, as I'm sure we've all seen in our nightmares, if you have a jury trial and they throw out ridiculous figures, that kind of figure wouldn't be covered. But if someone could say, I was hurt by whatever it was, I was damaged, I couldn't work for a month, my annual salary is £1,000, so therefore you owe me a twelfth of that.
Okay.
The final point there is the claims expenses, and this is there to cover any cost in defending a claim. So if there is any kind of accusation and you have to respond quickly and you offer to do a secondary survey, or a solicitor needs to be appointed to write a letter on your behalf, this part of the wording will assist there.
So as James is saying, that could include appointing someone to investigate. Could also be a situation where you have to appoint a loss adjuster, but perhaps more importantly and more expensively is the need to appoint a lawyer or solicitor. So this particular slide, why is marine professional indemnity or E&O important? For those who have never had a professional negligence claim, you will no doubt argue the risk is low, which we fully understand, but from our experience would perhaps beg to differ. As professionals, it is often hard to imagine a claim being made against you, but unfortunately, as our culture becomes even more litigious, it seems to be an increasing trend, unfortunately. Whether you're responsible or not, the cost of investigating and defending a particular alleged claim can rise very quickly, and the best business relationships can experience claims. In some cases, claims could even be made personally, outside the protection of your company name. It is times such as these that you need protection, support and peace of mind. And that's our intention as well, to work with you in situations where you encounter difficulties and situations where you need the help from your insurer. So we're here to help you in that respect.
And as you can see from that image, it's the worst case scenario, it's going to court. And that's where the legal costs, that's where the costs full stop, can become prohibitive, and that's where having professional indemnity insurance will help with that. You don't want to put your balance sheet of your company or your personal finances at risk, and that's why the insurance is there. So, as insurers, as underwriters, what do we look for in our clients or prospective clients and insurers? Quality assurance, we look for professionally run companies that have systems and controls in place, good training structures, just a bit of common sense in how you operate, and you're not just a fly-by-night operator.
The next point, next aspect of things we look into or consider is membership, and of course you're a member of the IRMS, and we very much factor that into the premium and the terms of the policy, and would discount the premium for that. So because we feel that that's a very important and valuable part of how we assess the risk.
As you know from your membership, you'll have access to seminars, you'll have access to conferences such as this one that's on today, and that extra continuous professional development is reassuring from an underwriting perspective.
We also look at the number of staff if you do employ staff, because we need to take into account the number of people that are issuing reports, giving advice, and doing any documentation as well.
Now, the main gauge for us in terms of judging the size of any surveying or other marine professional organisation, unfortunately it's rather crude, but it's on the income, on the revenue that you receive for the performance of the services that you're seeking cover for.
And that's gross income, so that's before any costs and expenses. For example, you may employ a subcontractor to do some specialist work. So we note that, but we rate and judge the premium based on your gross annual income.
The next very important point for us is the contracts that are used. As surveyors, we would hope that you would have your standard trading conditions, your terms of survey that you show to all of your prospective clients and you get them to sign up to beforehand. Those contracts will determine and lay out exactly what is expected of either party and exactly what are your defences in the event of a claim. So they are fundamental in any insurance policy that we underwrite. And if, for example, you came to us and said, oh, I don't have any standard trading conditions, I don't have any contractual relationships with any of my clients, we would not look favourably upon that, because when a claim comes, we have got no idea what has been agreed, what has been promised, and it's very, very difficult for us to evaluate that exposure.
Exactly. The difficulty there, as James has explained, is that really it's one word against another, and that's always difficult to defend, certainly when you're in court, because maybe the other side has interpreted something different to what you thought was going to happen, really. Within those contracts, we look to see how you defend or limit your liability. That's often by a monetary amount, and we normally expect that or recommend that that's 10 times your fee, because from our experience we feel that a court would look on that as a reasonable and favourable amount. Now, of course, the court, if they feel that you've been grossly negligent, they could set aside that limitation and award against you up to an amount that, well, who knows what that amount would be, but as James was saying earlier, that the contract is your first line of defence, so we hope that the contract is as watertight as possible.
And the final point is the claims history of any client, any prospective customer we see. If you have never had a claim or no experience of a claim, that's absolutely fantastic, that's fine. However, if you have had any experience of claims, regardless of whether they were successfully defended, whether they were denied, or whether there was a settlement, we need to know. And we're not looking to punish or exclude people who have had claims. What we're looking for is whether you've learned from it, whether, for example, you didn't have a contract, whereas now you do have contracts. For example, where maybe you let a trainee member of staff go on and perform their own survey a bit too soon, and they just didn't have the competency for it. It's these things. We're looking for people to As we said before, under the quality assurance banner, we're looking for professional companies that are constantly evolving, professional surveyors that are always learning and are always willing to modernise and seek improvements in their risk management.
Yeah, and I think that we're all this applies to all of us, that we learn from our mistakes, and we do try and avoid repetition where we can. So we take steps to improve our business, and by doing so, that protects your business and your reputation.
Now, the bottom half of the slide, we won't go into full details of it, but there are 6 example clauses that we look for in all contracts, all sensitive trading conditions. We touched on the responsibilities. It's got to be crystal clear. What is your client expecting you to do? Limitations of liability. As Chris said, have you limited it to 10 times your fee, or have you limited it to a set amount in whatever currency? You do have to bear in mind there, obviously, what is your insurance policy limit? Because if you agree to limit your liability to £1 million, for example, and you've only bought insurance up to £100,000, you've put your company balance sheet and your personal assets potentially at risk. Law and jurisdiction is the next point. We're based in London, so we normally have English law and jurisdiction. There are certain jurisdictions that we don't like, but the majority are okay.
Yeah, so for example, American law and jurisdiction is harsher than UK law and jurisdiction, so yeah, maybe that's one to avoid where you can. But of course, if you're dealing with an American client or customer, then it's probably difficult to avoid that.
Yeah, and then the next one, force majeure, which is in reference to essentially acts of God. If there is an issue that you, for example, you can't get to a survey by a set time because of a thunderstorm or because of a hurricane or whatever it may be, anything that's outside of your control, whether it be strikes, riots, that should not be an act, or that should be not be an excuse for a person to claim that you've been negligent, you failed to perform. It was completely outside of your control, and therefore your contract should exclude liability for that.
We also mentioned hold harmless, so please try to avoid holding someone else harmless, that we're all responsible for our actions. For example, if you employ a subcontractor to do a specific job and you agree to release him or her from responsibility and something happens, then the responsibility or the resultant claim will fall back on your lap, and then ultimately your insurance policy. So we should all be responsible for our actions and deeds, and with that also, while I think of it, make sure that where you do use a subcontractor, that person has their own insurance as well. So, what are the main exclusions in any marine professional indemnity policy? We've picked out 3 here that we think are very pertinent. Chris has just touched on the hold harmless element to this. As he said, that where you either subcontract or where you agree to hold another company, another party completely harmless for their services, you're effectively taking on their complete responsibility. So it increases your exposure, it increases your responsibility, and therefore it's something that we need to be aware of. We need, as underwriters, to agree in advance, because otherwise you might be going outside of the terms of cover of the policy. Another one is performance guarantee. Don't guarantee that you will do a particular survey within the next 2 days, and something happens that delays you, and you're not able to perform that survey on time, because your customer may well be relying on your survey, and there is always a risk that because it's not performed in the expected time, that the customer becomes upset and potentially loses money because of that delay. But that delay is really outside your control, really, so just be careful with that.
It's also on the performance guarantee side of things, it's worth mentioning in your reports whether you state the speed of a vessel.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want to do is say this vessel is capable of X knots, or it can go up to X knots, and it turns out that, for example, because of a mechanical issue, it can't do. You don't want to leave yourself open to that. So that's another side of the performance guarantee. The final point there is any hands-on activity. Professional indemnity insurance is based around, we like to refer to it as an intellectual service. So, for example, as a surveyor, you are using your experience and your training to look at a vessel, to find defects in the vessel, and then to report those defects or issues to your client, to your customer. What it's not designed for is if you are repairing any product, if you're manufacturing any product, if you are blending two goods together, anything like that is in the insurance world, it's a product liability. You therefore have created a product that you are liable for.
Another example there is that where you're repairing something, just be careful there, because your E&O or PI policy may not extend to a situation where you go on board a vessel to survey something and then you're also asked to repair it. We're not saying that we can't cover that exposure, we need to know about it, so just be mindful of that.
We touched on briefly that it's very important that whatever insurance policy you buy, you understand. Under your contract, as we said, we'd like to see limitations of liability. You've got to make sure that whatever insurance you purchase, if your limit of liability under that insurance, i.e. the maximum amount the insurers, us, will pay for any claim is, let's say, £1 million, you can't, or you have to be very wary of entering into any contract where you make yourself liable for more than £1 million, because then the difference between your insurance policy limit and what you've agreed to under contract, that's your corporate balance sheet, that's your personal assets potentially at risk there. And the other element to remember there is that your policy that you have on your insurance schedule includes the claims costs. So if you get a claim for £1 million and you have £1 million limit, if the claim is settled at £1 million, the insurers will not provide anything over the £1 million to cover costs. The maximum downside for the insurance company is £1 million. So we would recommend to people that if you have, I keep on picking on £1 million as a limit in your insurance policy, if you have £1 million limit, the maximum you should agree under contract to be liable for is 75% of that limit in your insurance policy. We tell people that because that then gives you a 25% buffer to cover any legal costs, any costs of barristers, solicitors, investigations, having an independent expert, having another surveyor perform the similar survey, so we have an expert opinion to support the original survey. These are the costs that are very easy just to assume that insurance will pick up, that they will pick up, but only within the limit of the policy.
We've had a real-time experience of this where one of our surveying clients was extremely worried. We were in court and the case wasn't going very well, and we could see that the award was going to go against us, which it did in the end. But the client was worried that with the legal fees and the indemnity paid, it was going to go through the policy limit and potentially could cripple his company. Fortunately, at the end of the day, the claim was reduced. It was quite an expense to us as insurers, but fortunately it meant it didn't come through the other side of the policy limit, and the insured didn't have to pay, other than his deductible, anything further.
The final point there is around the contracts. If in doubt, give any contract you're asked to sign by a client, give it to your insurance broker, seek their advice, and that if they're unsure, they will then come to the underwriter and the insurance company. Make sure you do that as soon as possible. Make sure you do that almost in any event, because if you agree to a contract that's outside of the terms of your insurance cover, it becomes very difficult and potentially quite costly to expand the insurance cover if that's possible.
So the next slide, mitigation prior to the survey. We've already touched on some of this. Just be careful of what is said or promised to the client, because as time passes, lots of things are not remembered. So just be careful of that.
And this becomes, when it becomes a verbal discussion, it becomes a case of he said, I said, she said, and it becomes very difficult in a court of law or any investigation to actually figure out who's telling the truth. So that's why the third point, and I know we keep on mentioning contracts and get everything in writing, but unfortunately it is the crux of the issue. You have to, every time you engage with a client and they ask you to perform a service, get it in writing, make it crystal clear what you're agreeing to do, what the parameters of your service is, or you're agreeing to do, or you're offering to provide. And then when the client is happy with that, happy with the pricing, happy with the timing of it, then make sure you get a legal contract or you get your standard trading conditions signed and agreed by you and your customer.
We appreciate that often when you're asked to perform a survey, there isn't a lot of time available. Often some surveys, especially when it's a damage survey, you have time against you, but please do try and get things in writing. Obviously we communicate mainly by email these days, so at least have a record of what's being expected of you by email.
So again, we're still banging on about contracts and contractual defence, I'm afraid, but one point here is legally the only thing that is expected of you is to perform your duty, your service that you've agreed to provide to a client with reasonable care, skill and diligence. If you go over and above that, then you are providing a service that is effectively over and above your legal requirement. So any contract where you perform or you guarantee, any contract where we would refer to it as strict liability, so irrespective of fault, they're the contracts that as insurers we become very worried and concerned. So you need to run those past us, run them past your insurance broker as soon as possible. We touched on it before. If you agree to liquidated damages, loss of profits for your client if you make a mistake, anything that's potentially punitive, those losses or those acceptable liability regimes in certain territories, Chris mentioned the US before, aren't acceptable under most marine professional indemnity policies.
So in addition to that, and just expanding on what James is saying there, try to avoid any responsibility for consequential loss. The other important point here is, we've got it here as time bar for claims, but when you do agree to something, to a service, to a survey by contract, try to have a time limit for claims to be made against you. And that time limit needs to be a reasonable period, and we often say that 12 months from the date of completion of the survey is reasonable, because the last thing you want is a scare in 5 years after the survey's been done and someone's trying to take you to court or trying to take some money from you. So at least with a time limit or time bar for claims in that contract, you have a defence.
So how can you mitigate the risk during the survey? You've obviously, prior to the survey, you've agreed with the client what your responsibilities are, what their expectations are, and basically what they would like you to do. So during the survey, be mindful of that. Don't try and provide anything extra. Don't open yourself up to any opportunity for the client to say, well, the surveyor said he would do this for free or he would do me a favour. Just try and be very, very professional about what you've agreed to do and what you are going to do.
Keep it to the point, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. Don't provide verbal promises. If the client is with you during the survey and they are pestering you over something or they want you to look at a specific part of the vessel, don't give any guarantees verbally. Almost stick to the line of saying, I'll put it in my report, you can review my report at a later date. Because you don't want to include it in the report, but because on board you told them something different or they interpreted what you were saying differently, they will rely on the verbal interpretation rather than what's in your report.
Okay, and then mitigation after the survey. Always be mindful of what you've agreed under contract to do. Don't try not to go beyond that. Be as concise as possible in your survey reports. Try not to be vague if you can. Just keep to the point.
And the third point there is being overly positive. If there are issues with the vessel, if there are concerns, or if you've got recommendations that an engineer needs to go in or another type of specialist, don't then finish the report with a statement such as, this vessel's in great condition. Something as vague as that will get picked on, and solicitors will look at that, ignore all the other recommendations, and they will say, in your report, you said the vessel's in great condition. And that will undermine all of the hard work, all of the professional performance that you performed in it. It's a weakness that we see more and more often, unfortunately.
And say it as you see it, really. If something's wrong, then just say it. A good comparison, I think, is a house buyer's report where it's quite specific, quite straight to the point, and that's really all you can do. You just need to be straight to the point, really, and try not to be vague, and try and be direct where you can.
So the cost of defending claims has grown considerably over recent years. The main reasons are the increasing value of boats and the expansion of the no-win, no-fee practice of various solicitors. Now, unfortunately, the cost of a survey doesn't really distinguish between different valuations of vessels, but from an insurance perspective, the cost of claims and the defence of claims certainly does. Now, we can't influence how you charge for your services. However, the insurance premium you pay for your professional indemnity insurance will have a direct correlation to the claims that we're seeing. Now, our insurance premiums must consider the quantity and value of claims, and when claims numbers start to increase, that naturally brings pressure upon the insurance premiums that we charge. Now, whilst we fully understand the majority of any surveyor's reports are accepted in good faith by their clients, as a surveyor, you always need to be diligent in how you write your reports, even to the extent that where they recommend the services of an expert is made clear why the client needs to consider such an appointment and why they have suspicions about an issue or why they feel that there is a need to have a survey in the first place. Claims have arisen in our experience where advice has been given to seek an expert's opinion on an area that is excluded or limited by the surveyor, but where the recommendation comprehensively or strongly enough hasn't been stated within the report.
Okay, every year Gannion receives dozens of claims alleging negligence on the part of the surveyor in carrying out the contracted survey work. Most claims arise out of pre-purchase surveys, where a claimant is looking for guidance on whether there are factors that should either cause them not to purchase the vessel in question, or if they do go ahead to purchase, to have the opportunity to use the surveyor's report to negotiate down the initial sale price. From an insurance perspective, we are keen to see members of the IMS protect themselves from claims arising out of alleged negligence as much as possible. If a determined claimant pursues the surveyor through the appointment of a lawyer and there is some justification for their claim, the costs will begin to rise. The importance of resolving disputes as quickly as possible cannot be underestimated.
So a couple of examples to illustrate the challenges that surveyors face. One of the smaller claims received this year was also quite an unusual one. The report issued was properly caveated in detailing the limitations of the survey, and it was a comprehensive report. The purchaser of the boat made some inquiries of the surveyor, with their principal concern being pre-existing damage to a double mattress in the main cabin. The claimant advised, "We noticed all of the studs on the bottom of the mattress were rusty and the mattress stained." This is after they'd purchased the boat. The surveyor inspected the mattress as far as they could, but didn't make any reference to the mattress in their report. Furthermore, the surveyor had only lifted the mattress to gain access to lockers underneath. So when the purchaser looked at the mattress, they had assistance and were able to completely turn the mattress over and see that the further end was water stained and some of the buttons were indeed rusty. The claimant put in a claim for roughly £1,000 for a brand new mattress. Now the surveyor visited the boat after this claim and decided to try and placate the claimant by offering to have the mattress repaired. The claimant rejected this and instead said that their opportunity to negotiate the price of the boat down at the time of buying was denied because of the surveyor's oversight and negligence. Now the first thing to point out here is that the offer to repair is outside of the surveyor's responsibilities and outside of the coverage of professional indemnity insurance. Another claim example is related to clients who ask the surveyor to pay particular attention to an area of concern they have when considering the purchase of a vessel. In one example, a surveyor was made aware that the purchaser had concerns over the condition of windscreens. The surveyor did look at the windscreens, but in their report they did not single them out for attention, and the comment on them was restricted to just one sentence. After the report was issued, the surveyor was asked to go back, and following the claimant's continuing concerns, they maintained their position that the windscreens were fine. An independent expert actually confirmed that the windscreens were delaminating. Now, despite the insurance broker's best efforts on behalf of their client and surveyor to suggest that the delamination may have occurred during the excessively hot summer months, the claimant appointed solicitors and presented a claim for £70,000. This highlights that where a client has specific recommendations or has a particular area of concern, surveyors should be warned and they should take extra care. For example, the purchaser may know that there's a problem from the particulars of sale, and they may be using your report to gain further financial advantage, i.e. they may not have only secured the boat at reduced cost because of the fault, but now they can claim against the surveyor and his insurers for the negligence in not spotting the issue. If the highlighted area or the area of concern is not an area that the surveyor is particularly comfortable in paying attention to, then you should recommend a specialist or an expert.
And finally, we've seen claims arising out of good reports that end on too positive a note. Statements such as, "The vessel is safe to put to sea after recommendations have been carried out and should provide her owners with many years of happy sailing," cause issues as the issues with the vessel are not sufficiently emphasised. We have settled a claim recently which started at £20,000 and was settled at £2,500 just before court action was undertaken, and in which we defended the surveyor. The claimant could not accept that after carrying out the necessary work and repairs to the engine and stern drives, that he had been made adequately aware of the extent of work necessary. The low settlement of £2,500 may be seen as a success considering the initial claim of £20,000. But the claimant's legal fees, as well as our own fees, amounted to over £20,000. The final cost of this claim will exceed the claimant's original exaggerated claim.
So, what to do in the unfortunate event if you ever receive a claim? The first thing to do is to get in touch with your insurance broker, and they will then get in touch with the insurance company. That should happen immediately. Any time delay could potentially prejudice your cover and also weaken any potential defence you have. Any report you issued, any documentation in relation to the incident, you need to collect that, collate it, and give it to your insurance broker. The more information your insurance broker and your insurers have about the claim, have about any circumstances surrounding any potential claim, the better and the more the helpful the response from your insurance company, insurance broker will be.
The more detail that you can provide, the better, including times and dates, if you can recall them, but hopefully that they've been recorded by email anyway.
And you should, hopefully this goes without saying, but you should never admit fault, never admit responsibility without speaking to your insurance broker and getting the approval of your insurance company. If you do that and the insurance company believes that you've prejudiced your defence, or the ultimate cost of the claim will be more than if you hadn't admitted fault or responsibility, then potentially your insurance cover will be reduced. So it's something that, if in doubt, of course, go back, acknowledge the claim, acknowledge the client's concerns, and just be honest and say, I'm going to hand this over to my insurance company, I'm going to speak to my insurance broker.
And then let them deal with it, and hopefully we can end up with a good ending.
And the final point, again, most of this advice will come from your insurance company and your insurance broker. If you have used an independent expert, engineer, or you've subcontracted part of your services out, you may need to consider placing them on notice for the claim if you believe that they contributed to the loss in any way, shape or form. Again, the sooner that you do that, the better, although please follow the advice of your insurance broker, insurance company.
So thank you very much for listening. We hope that what James and myself have mentioned is helpful and informative. And we wish you all good luck and a good business year next year.
And Merry Christmas, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also to you boys, Merry Christmas from me. Thank you very much for your contribution today.